If your Dodge Stealth twin turbo or Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4 has an excessively sloppy shifter, so much so that it prevents you from going into gear from time to time, this might be just the video for you. Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project Stealth Mode. The Dodge Stealth RT Twin Turbo and 3000 GT VR4 aren't known for their amazingly mechanical shifter feel. The issue can be compounded with decades of time passing and hundreds of thousands of miles accruing. Maybe you're driving a well-worn-in example, but you notice your shifter feel is really sloppy. Even in gear, you have 1 to 2 inches of movement where there really shouldn't be any, right? You know, the internet's full of solutions or possible solutions. I've done a lot to this shifter assembly to make it feel better, and I want to walk you guys through the steps I took, because now the shifter feels great. It feels just like it did off the factory floor. So I want to take you guys through that, show you what I did, the parts I used, and how I actually went about replacing everything I needed to replace. So tune in, guys. If you have that sloppy shifter and you're ready to get that feeling out of the car, here's what we did. Okay, now I want to show you guys the under the hood shifter bushings you need to replace. And they're a little tricky to see. I have some stuff moved out of the way, namely the air filter intake tube. I moved a couple other things to get general access to these, but here they are. Here's one of them. The other one's right up here. Cotter pins and washers need to be removed, and then that rubber bushing, which is probably super hard from going through so many heat cycles. It's probably going to be a gem to pop out. I have a feeling I'm going to be cutting them out. We're going to replace those with solid shifter bushings, which should improve the shifter feel. So that's where they are. Not going to be...
I did want to show you guys that I opened up the area a little more, removed some more intercooler and intake piping to get in there. And now I want to show you exactly how the old bushing compares to the new one. On the left, clearly you have the old rubber bushing. Now I used a drill and drilled some holes, and that allowed me to flex the rubber a little more to make it easier to remove the bushing, which I ultimately used a large pry hook for and kind of stuck it, popped it out. They come out pretty hard. The new bushing is going to look like this. It actually comes apart so you can fit it in around the shifter cable there. So this is what we're replacing. I've got the 3SX solid shifter bushings installed under the hood. Let's zoom in and see how they look. Nice and shiny. So pretty easy install, guys. The trickiest part, of course, is getting the old bushings out. Basically used a hook and pulled them. So we're looking pretty good under here. Gonna go ahead, cover everything back up. All the work we did is gonna disappear, but we've got to install all these parts we had to move to get access. So that's gonna be one step toward having better shifter feel, and I can't wait. I think that detracted a lot from the car, and this should fix a ton of issues. So let's go ahead, put this engine bay back together.
Accessing the shifter bushings isn't too hard on the 3000 GT VR4 or Dodge Stealth. You just simply pop the shift boot. It has this little plastic frame. You just kind of pop these clips out, come out really easy. Next thing, loosening your shift knob, which can be a little challenging. They're on there pretty tight, so just counterclockwise. Set that aside. And the rest should just pop right off. Better. So basically this whole shifter assembly is just unbelievably worn. Now I'm also doing the shifter plate, and I've done already the 2 under the hood, so those are part of that conversion to a solid bushing. That should firm things up. I also bought the rebuild kit for the entire assembly, so we're going to get in the assembly and kind of rebuild every little point, because there's lots of motion in places where there shouldn't be, and just even though each piece might contribute only a little bit of slop, once you get all that stuff working together, all that slop kind of mixed together, that's when you really have a recipe for a nasty shift feel, poor engagement, lots of slop even in gear. So we're gonna just take that out. So to remove it, pretty easy stuff, a little restrictive on space, but we need to remove the cables going to the transmission. So those should be pretty easy. Cotter pins pop out. And then we're also gonna remove the whole shifter assembly, which is really
only held in by a couple bolts going through. Pay attention though, before you start taking this thing and you jump in there Rambo style, take note of where everything is, especially the spring on that bolt. Make sure that when you put it all back together, everything's in the same alignment. So take lots of photos, document everything, and you should be good to go. So let's start removing this stuff. First things first, I'm gonna take care of these two shifter linkages here. If you hear some creaking during this video, I apologize. I'm leaning on the little armrest cubby area in the center console for leverage. So, all right, let's get under there and take these little cotter pins out. Well, one of the shift linkages put up more of a fight than the other. Got the cotter pin out just fine. The other one, in a few pieces. So always have extra cotter pins on hand. Let's hope the rest of this goes a little bit easier. I will defeat you, sloppy shifter. Things are pretty straightforward here. Just simply slide the shifter cables off of this arm and then off of this bottom U-shaped arm. There we go, a little looser. Now we just need to get these two bolts off of here and pull this whole assembly up. Both of these nuts we're gonna remove now, are 14 millimeter. And then the bolt simply slides out the back, it looks like. And I took that large bolt here and I put the assembly back on in the order I took it off of. So when it does come time to reinstall everything, always do these little things to keep your mind straight, guys. It helps you out so much more than just memorizing. And now our shifter assembly should just pop right out. Just like that. And now with it all removed, if we have play in here, it's probably due to some of these bushings being a little off. There's plastic bushings throughout, so we'll replace some of those. You then have a final snap ring to remove on this side, so go ahead and get your snap ring pliers and pop that off. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the entire shifter assembly, completely disassembled. Now I've gone ahead and ordered the OEM shifter bushings from 3sx.com. Now these are all OEM Mitsubishi bushings, which are great. So I'm gonna use a diagram, kind of line them up where they go on the respective parts here, see what we're missing, and see where everything's gonna go. So I have intentionally not removed any bushings. You can see I've laid out the new bushings, basically where they're gonna go on these parts. But I wanna show you the state of affairs that we're currently experiencing. Let's point out some big issues. This is where the shifter linkage connects to the actual gear lever. And as you can see, this bushing wasn't there. So we already have slop there. Now remember, if there's a location where a bushing should be and there isn't one, that's gonna create slop. So keep that in mind as we go through all this. So obviously that one missing. Both of these missing. This section here is what passes through this hole on the shift lever. Since those were missing, it looks like someone took a copper or brass fitting here. You can see this part's completely broken. This, I hope it's not welded on or anything. We're gonna have to break that off. Was probably trying to compensate for not having those bushings. So no doubt that was creating an issue. These two bushings are here, so we'll go ahead and replace those with new ones. We do have the U-shaped bushing here, which is a surprise. That usually breaks. Got a new one of those to replace that. As we come over here to this metal kind of U section, this is the part that goes at the very bottom of your shifter column. These bushings, not there either. So replacing those is gonna help a lot. These two clear ones are still there. That's the spring loaded bolt that goes through right here. So we'll just replace those with these new ones. So clearly, a lot of issues. We're just missing a bunch of bushings, and this is what causes slop. So they disintegrate, they're plastic, I get it, but you know, the DIY stuff like this is always scary. You're not gonna fix it like that. If it's a plastic piece, use a plastic replacement. Don't try to use anything soft. Like a copper is such a soft metal and it's not the right size. No wonder it didn't work. I have a feeling this shifter is gonna feel amazing when we're done with everything. So let's go ahead and swap all this stuff out. There we have it. All the bushings replaced. Nothing's missing now. So all we need to do is basically reassemble everything. Pay attention to how everything went, the order it went in. You know, if you have crush washers, and nuts. I took a lot of photos just to remind myself. Also the spring assembly, make sure that goes in the right way. That has to line up perfect when it shoots through. So we should be in a pretty dang good spot here, guys. So we only had 5 bushings that we replaced, even though we just installed 10. So half the bushings were missing that should have been on this assembly. So I'm gonna assume that caused a ton of slop. So let's get this back together, installed in the car. We're then gonna do the bushings on the shifter plate itself. We've done the ones under the hood, and that should firm it up even further. And this should be one of the best feeling shifters in any Dodge Stealth RT Twin Turbo or 3000 GT VR4. Stock wise anyway, not counting aftermarket short shifters. So let's get this all back together and hopefully it takes care of our crappy, horrible, sloppy shifter feel. Now we're actually going to be replacing the bushings on the shifter plate. The current ones are rubber with a little steel cylinder inside. We're going to replace those with the 3SX ones. It should sure up the feel a little bit better. Anywhere we can reduce any kind of slop or play is going to help. So 12mm bolts, 4 of them are holding that plate down. Now they are pretty tricky to get to, so you're going to have to get creative. Go ahead and remove all 4 of those. To get to the rear 2 bushings, if you can pull the carpeting away, put the bushings in that way, that's probably going to be your best bet. This will give you an idea of what you're working with the factory bushings. So they're rubber, but there's this metal centerpiece here that goes through the center and it's underneath the shifter plate. So remember that when you're trying to force it out, you got to lift it and push it through this way so it falls out the bottom. A little bit of a pain in the butt just because the accessibility isn't that good, but that's what you're working with. You got to get 4 of these out, and then we're going to start putting the new ones in. And here we are, the 4 stock bushings for the shifter plate. Let's go ahead and start fitting in those new ones. Here's one of the 3SX solid shifter bushings here for the plate. As you can see, it's a 2-part unit here. So this part will go on the bottom, this part will go on top. No rubber, nothing to break down, nothing to supply your shifter with any more slop. Let's go ahead and install these bad boys. Got all of our solid shifter bushings in for the shifter plate. Now let's go ahead and tighten those bolts back down and lock this whole thing up. What you want to do now that you've got the entire assembly in the vehicle, before we go ahead and put the cotter pins in and tighten everything down, row through the gears and see how it actually feels. Remember before, when we were hitting 3rd gear, we'd always clunk somewhere in between and then have to push it over a little bit and then up, and that was the biggest issue. So let's see if we can row through these gears a little better here. So we're in 1st, down to 2nd, that was pretty nice feeling. Up to 3rd, oh, very direct. Down to 4th, over to 5th, and reverse. Oh, guys, that feels 1,000 times better. Oh, wow. It's like having a new gearbox on there. Let's get our shift boot and shift knob back on here. Okay, guys, moment of truth. First. Second. 3rd, 4th, 5th. And let's find reverse. Simple.
And that's it, guys. We fixed our shifter sloppiness. We can actually row through all our gears now, and it feels great. Yes! That's a super win. And anybody that's experiencing sloppy shifter throws should definitely follow that path. Replacing all those bushings, and the 3SX solid bushing kit also adds a little bit to this. This is the way to go, guys. Get that shifter feeling good. What's the use of driving a manual transmission car if the shifts don't feel good and they don't actually go into the gear you want them to go into? Ah, so happy. Yeah. Can't wait to row through these gears.